Hey everyone, my name is Shelby and welcome to my YouTube channel. You might notice that I'm wearing a jacket inside, and that's because it is a beautiful leather jacket and I thrifted it. So I'm wearing it in this video because I'm very proud of it. And it's very cold out still, so I don't get to wear it outside yet, and I want to wear it. So there you go. Today I want to talk about the importance of children's literature and why it's important for kids and adults both. So, what is children's literature? Kind of anything in the age ranges of after a board book and before 50 Shades of Grey, somewhere in there. Historically speaking, children's literature would just have been stories that were told in a community. There wouldn't have been much difference between the stories told to children and the stories told, in conversation with other adults. They might have watered down some details and, brushed up some of that R-rated stuff, but for the most part, the stories would have largely been the same of what the family was consuming. Now, eventually, philosophers came along, people like John Locke, and took a look at children. John Locke being a man who did not have any kids, did not have a wife, and so I don't know how he would have any real bearing on how he would have gathered this information. My understanding is he's a bit of a philosopher, not a psychologist. And even back then, psychologists didn't really have a good understanding of women or children, let alone men, because they didn't have that either. But oh well. Anyway, John Locke took one look at kids and said, they are a blank slate, and we write on the blank slate of children. And that is what they grow up to. Society ran with that because society thought that children were literally blank slates and that anything that we exposed them to would result in the kind of person they would be. They started creating really heavily moralized stories. Think like biblical stories, but like at least biblical stories have some nuance to them. These had no nuance to them. It was literally things like Johnny stole an apple and then he got his hand cut off and died in hell. The end. Like, that was the kind of stories that they were trying to give to children because they wanted to instill morality in kids, and they were worried if they told the complicated stories of, say, the Bible or any other stories that were, going on, those kids might not pick up the nuance of some of these things or might idealize some of the not ideal characteristics of the peoples in the stories. Children have always gravitated towards very adventurous, outlandish, outrageous stories. And I think that we put that on children, but in actuality, all of us gravitate towards those stories. Those are good stories, ones that are gripping and bold. We all love those stories, but we put them on children. Children are just more honest about the things that they like, and they don't have the pretense of needing to feel very grown up in the literature that they consume. I also want to speak about children's literature as a genre. So, when I think about a genre, I think about like sci-fi or adventure or fantasy or something like that. All those categories exist within children's literature. So I would think of children's literature as a kind of broader umbrella of literature. But in reality, after learning about this topic, I actually think that children's literature isn't really its own genre. I think adult literature is its own genre. I think children's literature is just literature, and then adult literature is just adult literature, if you follow me. Like, if we're saying that The Lord of the Rings is children's literature, like, okay, that's pretty adult stuff, right? But because it's not sexiful, not, political and all those things, then it's deemed children's literature. So I want to talk for a second about the importance of children's literature or kid lit for children. Okay, we know that there are lots of benefits for children reading. There are things like the obvious benefits of, learning how to read and grammar and syntax and context and increasing their vocabulary and all those good things. Those are very important. Reading has also been shown to just be a good workout for the brain. Reading just kind of generally helps you be smarter because it's working your brain, and it's like doing push-ups, so that when you go to do a different exercise, your brain already has some muscle behind it. Not that your brain has muscles, but you know what I mean. There's lots of studies showing that When people start reading, their attention improves, their ability to concentrate improves, their imagination improves. Research has shown that people who engage with fiction specifically, so that's not self help books, but actual fiction stories, tend to develop better social skills, develop better empathy skills, and just general communication skills, which translate to the real world. Reading encourages children to identify with new characters, to try on different tropes or character types, to play with their own style of dress, to have their own heroes, to want to decide who they are going to be as an adult or as a child. I'm thinking about all the girls who read about Hermione Granger and were like, yep, I'm hitting the books. Even when kids aren't doing the actual reading and adults are doing the reading for them and the kids are listening, all those benefits tend to still be there in terms of imagination, social skills, empathy, vocabulary building, all those good things. And that's because people who read more are exposed to more words. And even if you're just hearing those words, you're still being exposed to those words, so you're learning more. Children's literature is generally fiction, and so it exposes children to life experiences that they probably haven't experienced yet in a very grandiose way. Like, yeah, a child has been scared before, but they've never been scared fighting a dragon. So they can identify with the feeling of being afraid to fight a dragon, but not in that particular circumstance. So they're able to kind of extrapolate what that must feel like, therefore being able to put themselves in other people's shoes better, and then they're able to, develop that in the real world as well. Okay, I've never been angry about that particular thing that my friend is going through, but I can imagine myself feeling angry, so I can imagine what they must be feeling like. The author C.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, was adamant about the importance of children's literature, and on this topic, he said, "Since it is so likely that children will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. Otherwise, you are making their destiny not brighter, but darker." It's so important to expose children to these stories so that they can have a sense of hope and a sense of courage and a sense of belonging in their world. So, those are all the important things about reading children's literature as a child, as the target demographic. But what about reading children's literature as an adult? I'm 31. I'm going to be 32 here in a couple days. Why am I still reading The Hunger Games or The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe or Holes or any of those? One of the big reasons that I think that adults should continue to read children's literature is that it keeps your inner child alive. Again, C.S. Lewis, the man with an opinion on children's literature, said that when I become a man, I put away childish things, including my fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up. C.S. Lewis also said, "No book is really worth reading at the age of 10, which is not equally and often far more worthy at the age of 50 and beyond." And finally, C.S. Lewis said, "Someday you will be old enough to start reading fairy tales again." Reading in your formative years, these stories become part of your identity and they become part of what molds you into the person that you become. For example, one of the books that I think was really impactful in my formative years, or series, I guess I should say, was the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. This was a very impactful book on me. It informed a lot of how I viewed children and adults and the relationship between adults and children, and how very bad things can happen to people, and that you can have a lot of resilience in those things. And I genuinely think that that book had a huge impact on me and maybe a contributing factor to why I eventually became a social worker. And now when I read those books, I'm taken back to who I was at that time reading them. I can feel my youthful, 11, 10-year-old Shelby reading those books, and I can feel those feelings of feeling that, adults don't know what's going on, and, why are these people in power so bumbling when they're supposed to be knowledgeable about what's going on. I think that reading the books that impacted you as a young person, again, when you're older, just keeps that inner child of yours alive and lets you become reacquainted with that young person inside of you. It's kind of the idea that you never step in the same river twice. So when you read a book, that text hasn't changed. If I were to revisit Holes, I I would see that the text has not changed, and I could actually even use my, the same copy that I read back in grade 5 or 6, whenever that was, And that text hasn't changed, but I have. I'm now, 31 turning 32, and I'm vastly different than I was the first time I read Holes. So this time I might see things a little differently and I might identify with different characters. I spent a lot of time reading and rereading Harry Potter when my son was born and I was on maternity leave. In that time of becoming a mother, it changed who I was and how I saw things in a really profound way. And I think Harry Potter was one of the first ways that I saw that change in me. And the reason is there's a line in Harry Potter that I would have just glossed over as a kid back when, I was reading Harry Potter and, you know, elementary, junior high, whatever years those were. But the first time that I read it as a mother, now it's like the most profound line that I've ever heard. When I was a kid, I really identified, with Harry, Ron, Hermione, or Ginny. And, you could kind of put yourself in their shoes. And then when I became a mother, I found myself identifying with Lily and realizing just how young she was when she died, and that I was actually older than Lily when I became a mother. And I know these are fictional characters, but it made me cry to think that, like, I'm already older than this woman. Harry deals with a lot of death in his life, and there's a part in the story where his family members get to appear as apparitions, and it says this about Lily's ghost or whatever that shows up. Lily's smile was widest of all. She pushed her long hair back as she drew close to him, and her green eyes, so like his, searched his face hungrily, as though she would never be able to look at him enough. Yeah. As a parent, I could never look at my child enough. And to be separated from my kid, I could never, like, if I was separated from my kid and then I got to be reunited with him for a brief moment, I think I'd just stare. And I know, like, it's fake. I know it's a fictional story, but, like, I feel like that line gives me so much empathy for other parents out there who are not as, fortunate as I am in having a healthy child who I get to see every day, right? And so I think that fiction just offers us a new way to see ourselves and to see others and see how we interact with each other, even though it's all fake. Okay. The other reason that adults should read children's literature is that we are all stressed out. We are all stressed out. And one of the reasons kids really like to read and reread and reread and reread and reread the same books is because of that familiarity. They know the rhythm of the story, they know what's going to happen. It's like it's like when adults come home and they turn on The Office and they just watch the same episodes over and over because it's reliable and you know what's going to happen and you feel safe. You can do the same thing with children's literature. You can pick up a book that you've read 100 times and you know the story almost off by heart, and it can be like easing yourself into a warm bath. Just that comfort and that routine is so important, especially in these unprecedented times. Groans in millennial. Children really seek out this familiarity unabashedly. They want routine, they want structure, they want repetition, right? Because they have no control over their lives. Everything is new all the time. And I think we, as a people right now, are going through the same thing of feeling like we have little control of our lives, feeling like nothing is the same, feeling like we have little control over the things that are happening. So next time you're feeling stressed out, instead of putting on The Office, just grab The Witches by Roald Dahl. All right, everyone. Well, I think that's enough for this video. I hope I've thoroughly convinced you about the importance of children's literature for both young people and for adults. And I hope that this inspires you to go pick up a kid lit book and read it and devour it and adore it. If you don't know what you would like to read, think about what you used to like to read and just go read that again. And maybe that book is the BFG, maybe it's The Grinch, but go read it and find the joy in it because it's good for you and it's good for your brain. I think I have a lot more to say on this subject, so I think I'm going to make another video about children's literature because children's literature is real literature and I'll fight you if you don't agree. All right. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe and let me know if this is something you're into because I'm into it. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.